Luke Schenn has played his first game as a Winnipeg Jet. How did he do against the New York Rangers?
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight, obviously, we have finally had Luke Schenn's first game in a Jets uniform against the New York Rangers, and I don't have a lot to report, which is probably what you would like to see from your bottom pairing. If you don't really remember them, they probably didn't do too much that needed to stand out for obvious reasons. So, hey, you know what? You will take that over some of the usual chaos. But this game against the Rangers, I think, was interesting for a lot of reasons, right? At a high level, I don't know that the Jets were like super great in this game. I think that there was some sloppiness, and Winnipeg ultimately got through 2-1. Wasn't a Picasso, didn't really need to be, but I think, at a higher level, I continue to have a little bit of concern about that Jets top line. This was another game where they really struggled. And, compared to some of the other games where they were maybe a little more like 50-50, tonight they were just really bad, outright bad, to the point where they were even losing battles against the Rangers' fourth line. Do I think that's really going to continue to happen? No, I think this was probably a little bit more of a one-off. It's, kind of rare that we see them play this poorly. So whatever was ailing them tonight, hopefully they kind of shake it off, because Friday, obviously a much bigger game against the Dallas Stars, and you'll want your top line in as good of a fighting shape as it gets before then. But they were basically a non-factor in this one, or if they were a factor, they were probably standing out for not good reasons. The rest of the team, though, I thought did pretty well. The bottom six, I thought, played their role relatively well. A couple of decent shifts, generally stayed out of trouble. Tanev in his third game, I did kind of tweet that it was a little bit of a funny watch tonight. He was very energetic and really couldn't stay on his feet. So Brandon Tanev, all gas, no brakes, as we are accustomed to with him. If there's a group that really stood out, though, probably the second line. The second line, I would say, was definitely the strongest, and a lot of it wasn't just Ehlers, right? Cole Perfetti had one of his absolute best games of the season. Perfetti, I think, for a while now, has really started to show that his game has grown by leaps and bounds. There's a confidence in his puck carrying, his ability to force turnovers, strong defensive reads, great puck retrievals. The guy has just been all over the place, and finally, a couple of great assists tonight. He had a hand in both goals, just continuing to show so many different facets of his game. I do want to spend a little more time talking about him specifically later, because I think that there's a real chance he could become a center again for the Jets, and I really wonder if the Jets might have their answer down the middle waiting on their roster. Whether they'll actually find it or not, that's a bit of a question to be answered later. But at least for tonight, I thought that he was honestly the best player on the ice. Even with Hellebuck making some really great saves and doing a lot, Perfetti was just leaps and bounds, in my mind, the best skater on the team. So, wow, what a night from him. Really impressive. I think he got first star as well. Fantastic performance. That's the kind of stuff that you really want to see out of your young star player. As he continues to grow in confidence and ability, that will only hold good things for the Jets. If you're wondering how Luke Schenn did, I would say Schenn, was quiet, relatively stable, didn't really do too much. And in a game like this, it's probably all you had to do. Where Winnipeg, I thought, was sloppy and had some really bad turnovers and stuff. The third pairing of Fleury and Schenn, yes, Fleury and Schenn, not Stanley and Schenn, I thought they, acquitted themselves well enough. I think the biggest thing for the third pairing is that you just have a little bit of stability, right? Stanley does his best, but usually when he's in, it's a bit of a chaotic situation. I get really excited about the performance? Probably not. I think it was fine. I think the bigger question I have is what it looks like when you start facing, a real top end playoff team. The Rangers, for their part, are pretty bad. So let's see how Schenn does once the pace of the game starts to pick up. But for tonight, I thought he did it, about as well as you could ask of a guy who is probably going to be tasked with just getting the puck out relatively cleanly, and he did that on a pretty routine basis. I think the other, minor concern I may have is once you get to the playoffs, you'd probably like your blue liners to be a little more active offensively, and we didn't really see that from him as much. It's also not really a part of his game that I think the Jets should expect much from. What you're getting is a big guy who's going to be going for hits, probably more of a defensive specialist than anything, and that's probably what you get with Schenn, generally speaking. So as long as he keeps it up and continues to put up these sorts of games against quality opponents, I don't think he'll complain at all. But, do you want that extra little bit of puck carrying ability? Maybe that's where you think about bringing a Miller back in on his offhand, because like Fleury can kind of do it, but it's maybe not the most ideal situation. So something to keep an eye out for. But in terms of how Schenn did in his first game, yeah, fine. Exactly what you'd probably want in a game like this. I was just really surprised that Arniel actually scratched Stanley. I didn't really think that would happen coming into this game. Logan has really been on a level of bad that I can't even begin to describe. And I feel bad for him because, like, he is really trying his hardest. It's clear that he was basically drowning at this point. And so the coaching staff had to make some sort of a call. And thankfully, they've identified at least the right decision to make. Now, not putting Miller back in, I do still have questions about, but at least, if you're looking at Fleury, Schenn, that's probably a fair enough third pairing. We'll see if he goes back to that well on Friday. I do have some suspicion about how Arniel is going to do this stuff over the next couple of months. A part of me feels like he may be waiting for a chance to put Stanley back in. Maybe I'm being a little overly critical here. I just feel like, at times we've seen coaches with the Jets do the sort of thing where they will make the right choice, they will make the right benching, but then, a couple of games later, that same player is back in the lineup in an elevated role, and it's like the progress we got basically got erased. So let's, wait to get too excited. But if this is the sort of stuff that Schenn will do going forward, I think I would much prefer that to the chaos of what it's been with Stanley the past few months. So we'll just have to wait and see how it goes. But I think Dallas presents one of the clearest and most interesting real first tests of this team in a while. Winnipeg's been beating up on a lot of bad teams. They've beaten some good teams earlier this season. Now it's time to see how they'll do against a post, Four Nations break top-end opponent. But, will Rantanen be on the score sheet? Hopefully not, right? And it would be nice to make sure that Winnipeg continues to be first in the Central. That's maybe the biggest goal of all, not just playing well against a really good opponent, but also pushing back some of those teams that are right behind you and ensuring that they know their place in the Central. But of course, I did mention I wanted to chat a little bit more specifically about Perfetti for a bit, just because I think that there's some interesting insights to glean from his overall growth and what I think he can do for this team going forward. Before we dive into Cole Perfetti's game, though, did want to let you know about our friends and partners at Factor Meals. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. And Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, and grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. I find that it's very convenient. You've got some really great flavors, and the meals always come with fresh ingredients. Again, it's just a couple of minutes in the microwave, and then it's ready. No meal prep, no time, no mess. It's so convenient. It's great. And you can take it on the go if you're, maybe an office worker and you want a good meal that's going to be wholesome and keep you fueled for all that comes ahead. You can eat smart with Factor and get started at factormeals.com/lockedonnhl50 off and use code lockedonnhl50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. Make sure that 50 is entered as numerics. That's code lockedonnhl50 off at factormeals.com/lockedonnhl50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor Meals box. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us as we are chatting a little bit about some specifics from, the past couple of games, I would say, and really the last several weeks of Cole Perfetti, right? I know that I was just sort of glazing him for his performance against New York a couple of minutes ago. And I wanted to take some time specifically to chat about his overall evolution because I think Perfetti has really grown into one of Winnipeg's most reliable, most consistent players. In terms of creative two-way forces on this team, I'm not really sure that many players are doing what Cole is on a routine basis. Where I think he has really stood out is his forechecking. That has kind of been the genesis of a lot of his overall engagement in games. In previous years, you might see him kind of flake out a little bit. Maybe he is a little bit tender in the corners. Maybe he wouldn't go as aggressively. I've never personally felt that he was one to shy away from that kind of stuff. But I think now that he's more fully invested and he's also winning those battles in 50-50 pucks, it's been much more noticeable how good his overall forecheck has gotten. This version of Perfetti has been winning all those duels, using the interior positioning along the walls to make sure that the puck still gets to where it needs to go, and continuing to just be a real menace along those like the half wall areas. Sometimes he'll make great pickoffs when teams are trying to exit. And if he makes a mistake and turns the puck over, he is usually the first guy back to try and atone for it. So I think so much of his game has really come through with redoubled efforts, a great forecheck, a surprisingly physically robust game. He's not the tallest guy, but he doesn't really let that be a problem. Where you see Stanley kind of getting knocked off the puck and kind of losing those battles, Perfetti is one of those players who, even when he's getting cross-checked and stuff, is always trying to make sure that the puck is taken care of and gets to a safe outlet. I think it's a very admirable thing. I consistently find ways to be impressed with the little small details in this game. That is, I think probably part of the reason why Arniel continues to give him so much trust. Arniel in the past, with Bones, they didn't always have him in a prime role on this team, and this year it's been a very different story. Perfetti's playing more, he's being used at higher leverage minutes, and I really feel like he's earned so much of that ice time. In this game, for sure, he was my first star of the game. I came away really impressed with his performance. Just happy to see him to continue to blossom into a really good player for the Jets, and I'm starting to think he can play center now. He has played center, in the past. In junior, he did play center briefly with the Moose. He's done it for a couple of games for Winnipeg, but we really haven't seen him do it in a long time. And I think part of the reason that switch really needs to happen is that Nemesnikov right now is crashing the net pretty well. He did score a goal in this game, but it's more a byproduct of what Ehlers and Perfetti are doing when Nemesnikov is able to get those sorts of goals. He'll crash the net. He keeps it relatively simple, and I think the lack of offensive creativity and IQ has been really noticeable when Perfetti and Ehlers are doing those sort of dazzling 1-2 layoffs and one-touch passes and stuff, and Nemesnikov really struggles to make something of it. I think if you put Vlad back out as a winger who can just sort of be a bit of a wrecking ball on the forecheck, that's going to start to pay dividends. I think Cole's, slot drive in recent games where he'll basically engage 2 to 3 opposing skaters and kind of get the inside advantage with the stick handling. That to me is the sort of stuff that tells me that you might be able to get more out of him now that he's is compensating for his skating. He's navigating space a little more effectively. And I think he's not afraid to mix it up with those defenders. And with Ehlers and Nemestikov kind of flanking you, I think you can get a very chaotic situation with him, carving down the middle, trying to open up space, and those two guys, doing their varying approaches to attacking the crease and slots. So I have really felt like Perfetti deserved another look for a while now, but obviously the coaching staff has continued to use Vlad down the middle. I do hope that maybe they give Perfetti more of a shot as a center. I do think that his game really does merit that consideration. The mobility of his own skating has improved noticeably, and I think the other part of his game that really stands out is it's up here, right? His brain moves at a level that not many NHLers could really approach, and because of that, he knows timing. He's got it down. He's got great spatial awareness. He knows when he can push the advantage and when he needs to back off. And that really accounts for a lot of the lack of foot speed. I think you saw it in, the game against the Rangers, where he would pick his spots and timing incredibly well. And even though he's not the fastest skater, he still got by some of New York's defenders. So I really feel like I can't say enough about him so far. I'm glad that the points are starting to finally flow again. Ever since he said he needed to play more like a prick, he has been so complete. He's got 27 assists on the year now after tonight's game. I'm really happy with his development. I think he really is a player who, for me, the sky's kind of the limit with him. And it's funny because he's, playing 13 minutes in this game and somehow still pulled off a fantastic performance. A very, very interesting player. 40 points now, career high. I think he can still reach 50 by the end of the season if his current scoring rates continue. And if that happens, man, just look out for him in the playoffs. His confidence right now is red hot. He is absolutely feeling it. And hopefully, as the Jets continue to take on some really good opponents, he earns a bigger and bigger role in this team. I know that the ice time may not be 100% there yet, just because I think Arniel tends to split his middle six pretty evenly, but Perfetti might be worth a few extra shifts, man. He is starting to make a real case that he can kind of drive his own bus. And if he can, again, I'd like to see the Jets try him back at center. The worst that happens is it doesn't work out, the experiment ends, and he goes back to being a winger. But I think if it does work, it fundamentally alters how this team can be constructed. And I think really, with the trade deadline being a little more modest, I think that's really my biggest thing, right? I've said for a while that I think the Jets can improve internally quite a bit. I don't really expect the top line to change unless something really drastic happens. And, I'd prefer that to happen before the playoffs if they're going to do something. But Perfetti being your 2C opens up a world of opportunity for how you start to match up. He, becoming like a really good play driver down the middle would be like the best case scenario organizationally for this team. It gives Jaeger a little more time to develop. It takes off some of the pressure of Lowry and Scheifele to carry a lot of the load. And I think having Cole really blossom into this 2C again would be, just organizationally speaking, a fantastic success story. And, it would just kind of fulfill a promise that I think the Jets were hoping for when Perfetti was initially drafted. And again, I know that his mobility is maybe not at the top levels of some other players, but unlike Monahan and some of those guys who are not as fleet of foot, I think Perfetti's ability to read the game at an elite level compensates in ways that not really many other players I've ever seen can do. And because that brain is constantly working, he just doesn't really seem to tire. His work ethic and drive are really, really impressive. So, hopefully the floodgates continue to go for him. I know that he's had a couple of games where maybe he didn't record a point, maybe things weren't coming as easily, but overall, this year has been a really big step forward. I think Perfetti, the sky's the limit with him, and as he continues to get more and more confident, let me tell you, man, that future long-term deal is going to hit like something else, dude. I can't wait. I'm glad that the Jets haven't had to part with him yet. He is one of my personal favorite players on this team, and the guy who, as soon as he was drafted, I felt like he was going to become a crucial part of this Jets core and somebody that at one point or another was going to be labeled for stardom for this team. And I'm starting to see those real signs of progress from Cole, where he is starting to take over those shifts in his own way. And I think that is the clearest sign that he is ready to hit another level for Winnipeg. So if he can do that during the playoffs too, heck yes, that is what I think we've all been waiting for. And actually, I did see somebody on Twitter just now talking, responding to something I said about maybe trying Perfetti at 2C. And, I know that there's been some thought about Velarde maybe doing it, but I think Gabriel at this point, he's pretty firmly out wide. Perfetti for me should be the guy. Let's see if he can do it again. If so, and if he really proves that he can run with it, the sky's the limit for your playoff run then. Suddenly the Jets org looks real different, and again, all it takes is some internal tweaking and a little bit of experimentation. The Jets don't have a lot of time to try this stuff, so I wouldn't, want to mess around and have them wait for it, but hopefully, if they're listening and if they want to give an experiment or two, this would be a good time while you're still in first. Take advantage of that ground you've got. Make sure that you can kind of get some decent results. Don't run it for too long if things start to crash out. But, give yourself a shot. If you can find a way to improve 5% before the postseason without even having to trade for somebody, I think that is probably the best outcome of all. So excited about that. But on a related note, I do want to talk a little bit about the top six because I feel like it's a little unbalanced right now, and I think that that's starting to show more and more the past couple of games where the Jets' top line is really not the factor that I was hoping it would be in this back stretch of the part of the season. So we'll chat about that in just a brief moment. But before we go any further, did want to shout out about our friends at Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. And they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep you feeling fuller for longer. I'm one of those people who kind of likes the shells, but a lot of folks don't. They don't appreciate the work. Maybe it's just me being from Maryland. I am used to cracking crabs. I would say that I like the crab cracking a little bit less. I feel like pistachios with the shells are a little easier, a little quicker gratification, but a lot of you probably don't. They've also got a no-shelled variety for you too. Wonderful Pistachios also comes in several great flavors, and of course, they are always packed with a complete protein coming with 9 essential amino acids. They're great for on the go. They're great for an afternoon snack. Maybe you're at work. You need to pick me up before the gym. Wonderful Pistachios are here to help. So get snackin' and get crackin' with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on these closing thoughts as we're chatting a little bit about some slightly concerning trends with the Jets' top six the past couple of weeks. Less so with the second line and really kind of focusing on the top line. The second line will have nights where it's not as effective, and we've seen that plenty of times. I think if you worry about anything with line two, it's probably more of the defensive zone shifts where at times they do get pushed around a bit. Perfetti, I think, has kind of worked to sort of counteract that, but even still, Ehlers and Nemesnikov, not exactly the most resilient defenders on the team, but their offensive production so far and their creativity has been enough to sort of compensate, even with Vlad occasionally having some stone hands. The top line, it's not been as rosy of a picture. The past few games, they've kind of been getting plastered. And I've said this for a while that I was worried that this would start to catch up. I think, again, on the whole, the top line this year has been much improved compared to last year, but the bar was so low last year to where even a small individual improvement to one of the skaters would probably have a reasonably big impact on the actual line results. Connor's performance this year has definitely been head and shoulders above what I thought he was going to do in terms of his overall game, and so that's really had a profound impact. But if he starts to struggle, this line kind of goes away again. Scheifele is mostly the same as he's always been. I think it's more like he just hasn't always been able to show his level of offensive skill when, Connor's kind of not supporting as much. Velarde, I think, is nice as a complementary player, but again, I think this trio really lacks an element of speed on the perimeter that allows the other guys to start to lose their marks. I think when you have Ehlers up there, it's just a very different dynamic. You don't have as much heavy foot stuff. Connor doesn't have to be the lead transition guy, and I think that lets him be more of a poacher in ways that, are really beneficial to his scoring ability. And it's not like he's, wanting for goals this year, but I think he can be even more lethal if he's not having to be the bus driver. He can kind of do it this year, which is more than I can say about previous seasons. I just don't think it's like the most optimal situation to ask him to do it. And I know I've been saying this for, multiple seasons now. You can probably count on multiple hands the number of episodes that I've talked about the top line. Probably like many, many hands. It's a recurring theme. The top line for Winnipeg, again, it's better this year, but it's still not where it needs to be. And I think Friday could be a really big test of what I'm talking about. If the Jets' top line shows up against Dallas, I feel a little bit better about things. But the game against Carolina, tonight's game against the Rangers, previous performances where they really haven't been at the races, I think that continues to validate what I've said about them, which is that, if the Jets really want to go on a deep playoff run, they've got to mix those lines up. I know that Connor and Scheifele are basically inseparable, but at some point, you got to do something to try and counteract the lack of performance, because I feel like, aside from some really good individual moments, together they just haven't really been able to create enough. So curious to know if Arniel feels that way. We saw how diamond hands he was with Stanley in the lineup, so I'm not really holding my breath, but it would be nice if the Jets try something different at some point. Like I said on the previous episode, they are really loath to change much of anything when it comes to the forward lines. There are only a couple of players who ever really move around a bit, and it's really in your depth units, which that's where you're going to get the least benefit from. If you want to make a big splash, if you want to get this team going at 5v5, it's got to be with your best players. I don't think that they're going to be as bad as they were tonight. Don't get me wrong. Like Connor, Scheifele, and Velarde, again, have been better this year. And tonight, I think, was like an especially bad game from them. So I don't expect that to be the norm going forward. But I also worry if you start to face, those Colorados, the Vegases, even the Stars have a matchup advantage against the Jets there. It's not a great scenario for Winnipeg. They're already going to be fighting it. Let's find a way to try and make Hellebuck's life a little bit easier. And, maybe switching up your top nine, maybe coming up with some new line combinations before you get to the playoffs and get, pushed around a little bit in the first couple of games would be good. I don't think these are problems that necessarily show up against a Calgary or a Vancouver in the first round, but you get to the second round, that starts to become a real concern. So curious to know how you all feel about that. I know some of you are probably on the same wavelength that I am. I'm curious to know how many of you who have generally been holdouts are still feeling like that top line is getting it done. Even against bad teams recently, I feel like I haven't been as impressed with them as we've seen in other games. They usually take advantage of defensively loose teams. That's not been as much the case lately. So let's hope that it's not, a downturn that's here to stay, because, there's no real shot that the line gets broken up. So if they're going to stay together, they'd better play well together. That's, I suppose, my big takeaway. But again, drop your thoughts in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Tomorrow, we'll probably have some standings updates. I think the race for the playoffs now is really getting to a dead heat. The Jets are in a very good position to clinch their spot in the next couple of games. I think that is very close. But, in terms of the President's Trophy race, that's still hot as ever. So we'll chat about that on tomorrow's episode. But for tonight's show, that is going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for listening and making us your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you back here tomorrow with more Jets coverage. So see you then. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets go.